the 4th of June, 2005. It was supposed to be the end of an era, a graduation trip for the senior class of Cloudcroft High School in New Mexico. 24 students, most of whom had known each other since childhood, boarded 2 white vans with camping gear, sleeping bags, and a disposable camcorder. Their destination: a remote, unofficial campsite in Lincoln National Forest, known locally as Devil's Bend, a name used more out of tradition than belief. They were expected to return the next afternoon. When they didn't, no one panicked, not at first. Delays were normal. Cell reception in the forest was unreliable. Parents exchanged messages, agreeing to wait a few more hours. By evening, 3 families had driven to the trailhead to wait. But no one showed up. Calls to the school went unanswered. It was the weekend. The teacher who had volunteered to chaperone Michael Rowe wasn't responding either. By nightfall, 5 families had filed missing persons reports. At 6:42 p.m., the McAllister family received a voicemail from their daughter, Claire. It lasted 12 seconds. Laughter in the background, the sound of branches snapping, and her voice, urgent and muffled. Wait, no, what is that? Then silence. No goodbye. No hang-up sound. Just dead air. When local authorities hiked into the site the next morning, they expected to find a group of teenagers who'd gotten lost or turned around. Instead, they found a campsite undisturbed. 3 tents still standing, 2 more collapsed from the wind. Coolers with food still inside. Folded clothes, phones dead but intact. Backpacks zipped, laid in a neat circle. Even the campfire had been put out properly. There was no sign of struggle, no blood, but also no footprints leading away from the site. Not a single trail, not a single clue as to where 25 people had gone. It was as if they had been erased. The initial search was swift. By dawn, on the 6th of June, less than 36 hours after the students were supposed to return, the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office, along with local fire crews and volunteers, had mobilized. Helicopters flew overhead. Dogs combed the surrounding trails. A base was set up near the trailhead where parents waited, sleepless and silent. The campsite was photographed, documented, and sealed off. Investigators circled the area for miles, looking for footprints, broken branches, tire tracks, anything. But there were no signs of where the students or the teacher had gone. It was as if they had walked away without touching the earth. One ranger noted that the tree canopy near the site was unusually thick. No aerial footage revealed anything. Thermal drones were deployed. No heat signatures. Searchers shouted into the trees for hours, their voices swallowed by the forest. By day 3, they brought in cadaver dogs. The dogs reacted oddly, sniffing in tight circles, whimpering, then freezing. One handler said softly, "It's like they're confused, like they know something was here, but isn't anymore." The local press picked up the story first, then regional outlets, then national. 25 people don't vanish without a trace. Not in America, not in 2005. Still, no evidence emerged. No bodies, no signs of wildlife attack, drowning, or landslide. No ransom notes, no threats, no witnesses, no theories that made sense. Only the voicemail. 12 seconds of unease. When the McAllisters gave it to the police, audio specialists examined the background. There was laughter, yes. Then Claire's voice, half panic, half disbelief. Then, something else. A low, rhythmic sound. Almost like breathing, but slower. Deeper. Not human. But just as quickly as the story exploded, it faded. After 2 weeks, the national media moved on. After a month, the FBI quietly closed their field presence. After 90 days, the case was labeled inactive. The forest grew back around the campsite, and the students of the class of 2005 became names on a wall, stories whispered in a town that had no answers. Only questions. There were 24 students and 1 teacher. Their faces at first were everywhere on telephone poles, in grocery stores, on television. But after the headlines faded, only the families remembered them as more than missing names. Lana Reyes was class president, meticulous, soft-spoken, always the one to plan the fundraiser or take the group photo. She had a scholarship waiting for her at Stanford. Her mother kept her bedroom exactly as it was the calendar, still stuck on June 2005. David Nakamura was the quarterback. Everyone said he could have gone pro, but David wanted to study history. His little brother, who was 8 when David vanished, now visits the empty football field every year on his birthday. Sienna Holloway had a sketchbook she never let go of. She drew people from memory, animals from dreams, and places she said didn't exist yet. One of her final drawings, found in her locker after the disappearance, showed a narrow canyon lined with tree, exactly like the one where the hikers would stumble 17 years later. Alex Trevors was obsessed with cameras. He had 3: a digital, a disposable, and a battered Hi-8 camcorder he bought at a yard sale. His dream was to make documentaries about forgotten places. That camcorder was never found. There were friends, siblings, loners, overachievers, stoners, musicians. And there was Mr. Michael Rowe, the English teacher who volunteered to chaperone after the original staff member pulled out last minute. He was well-liked, newly married, and known for his habit of collecting old books and writing poetry no one ever read. They weren't extraordinary, but they were real. And in a town like Cloudcroft, with only 1 high school and 2 coffee shops, their absence echoed louder than any siren. In the years that followed, there were candlelight vigils, photo slideshows, and a scholarship fund in their name. But as the town moved on, there were still some who kept their names close. One mother said, "You don't lose 25 people. You leave them somewhere. And one day, they come back." At the time, it sounded like grief. 17 years later, it sounded like a warning. The 4th of June, 2005. It was warm that evening, the kind of dry summer air that settles heavy over the New Mexico hills. The group had arrived at Devil's Bend just before dusk, a secluded spot a few miles off any marked trail, known mostly to locals. There were no ranger stations nearby, no facilities, and no cell service. That was part of the appeal. They pitched 5 tents in a loose circle around the fire pit. Alex filmed part of it, narrating with mock serious commentary as David struggled with tent poles, laughter, teasing, bad jokes. Someone blasted music from a small speaker. The playlist was burned onto a CD labeled 2005 Bangers. Later that night, they cooked hot dogs over the fire. Someone passed around marshmallows. At least 2 students were quietly drinking from bottles hidden in their backpacks. Typical, harmless rebellion. Claire McAllister texted her mom at 9:03 p.m. "We're all good. Just stars, trees, and smoke. Love you." It would be the last message ever sent from the site. The students weren't alone in the forest. At least, that's what some of the families came to believe. A nearby hiker later told investigators he heard strange echoes around midnight voices, maybe, but repeating, as if someone were mimicking speech rather than speaking. He dismissed it as imagination. The forest plays tricks when you're alone. Around 10:30 p.m., Alex reportedly left his camera recording on a log aimed at the group. That footage was never recovered. Only the lens cap was later found, lying in the grass several feet away. What happened after that, between the laughter and the silence, is unknown. At 6:45 a.m. the next morning, 2 families waited at the trailhead to pick them up. By 7:30, no one had returned. By 9 o'clock, one of the parents walked 2 miles into the woods alone. They found the campsite. It looked exactly as it should have, minus the people. Breakfast supplies laid out, unopened. Blankets still rolled. A single tent zipped shut, empty inside. No blood. No struggle. No notes. Just air thick with morning haze and an unexplainable, crushing stillness. It lasted 12 seconds. The message landed in the McAllister family's voicemail inbox at 11:08 p.m. on the 4th of June hours after Claire's last text. No call showed on their caller ID, just a new message notification, blinking red on the base of their kitchen phone. When they played it the next morning, something about it made Mrs. McAllister sit down. At first, there was static. Then, a sudden burst of noise laughter, quick and breathless. Claire's voice, unmistakable, cut through the sound. No, seriously, what is that? More laughter. A pause. A single, shuddering breath. Then something else. A low sound, almost like a rumble. Deep, pulsing, rhythmic. Claire's voice again. Guys? Wait. And then silence. No click. No end tone. Just silence. Stretching out until the system cut it off. Audio forensics teams later analyzed the recording. They confirmed the background was real likely recorded outside, possibly near water. The laughter was identified as at least 4 different voices. Claire's tone was anxious but not panicked, until the end. But the sound after her final words, the rumble, couldn't be placed. It wasn't wind, it wasn't thunder. It wasn't mechanical. It registered too low to be human. Some investigators thought it might have been an animal, maybe a bear's growl distorted by distance, but others disagreed. One report stated plainly, the frequency pattern is not consistent with any known wildlife in the region. The voicemail was never released to the public. Only a few people ever heard it in full. One of the detectives later told a journalist, off record, it didn't sound like something coming toward them. It sounded like something waking up. The phone Claire used to make the call was found days later in her zipped backpack at the campsite. It was powered off. The battery had been removed. By the end of the first week, with no sign of the missing class, theories began to grow like roots tangled, quiet, and hard to pull out. Some were harmless. The students had run away. They said staged the whole thing like a prank or a social experiment. But even the wildest teenagers didn't leave behind food, phones, and untouched sleeping bags. And they certainly didn't vanish without at least one person eventually reaching out. Others believed it was a planned group suicide, but that theory collapsed almost immediately. No evidence of ritual, no notes, no bodies. Then came the strange ones. A local hiker told a deputy he'd seen flickering lights in the trees the night before the group was supposed to return. Not flashlights, he said, more like soft pulses, spaced out and high above the tree line. He thought it was a drone or an aircraft at first, but the pattern didn't match any known signals. One woman who lived on the outskirts of Cloudcroft claimed she heard humming that night, just past midnight, like a power line vibrating in the air, only deeper and lower. Her dog reportedly barked for over 20 minutes, staring at the forest. Then there was the man who walked into the sheriff's station with a crumpled map and a story he refused to tell unless the lights were off. He said he used to work in fire control. He'd seen that place, Devil's Bend, once, back in the late 80s. Said it wasn't marked right on the maps, and that when they camped there for a training exercise, the radios died. The trees, he claimed, felt wrong. He left after one night. No one else from his team would talk. All of this went into the case file as background noise. But one note, scribbled in a margin of a field agent's journal, remained unexplained. No sign of predators, no storm activity, no collapse or landslide, and no reason at all for 25 people to walk away at once. Eventually, the rumors faded. The stories became whispers. And Cloudcroft, a town that never expected to be on the news, slipped back into uneasy silence. It wasn't found on purpose. 17 years after the class vanished, 2 hikers, a couple from El Paso, were following an overgrown side trail in Lincoln National Forest. The woman slipped first, tumbling through a patch of brush. Her partner followed, crashing into a slope of loose earth and dry pine needles. They landed in a shallow drop-off, no more than 12 feet down, but what they found wasn't dirt or stone. It was fabric, faded, mold-stained, still holding the outline of a folded t-shirt. They called Park Services, confused but curious. Within a week, the area was cordoned off, cleared, and investigated. What was unearthed there stopped the reopening of the case from being just another cold file review. There was no mistaking the items recovered. 4 backpacks, their zippers rusted shut. A worn banner with Cloudcroft Class of 2005 printed in black and gold. Several personal items, hair ties, notebooks, broken sunglasses. A dented thermos with initials etched faintly on the side. DN. Most chilling, however, were the fragments of clothing found beneath a layer of moss and sediment. Many of them were school-issued uniform pieces. Some were still folded, others were twisted unnaturally, as if discarded in a hurry. One Letterman jacket, partially preserved, had claw-like slashes across the back, 3 parallel lines. But there were no bones. No blood. No bodies. Just things. As if the people they belonged to had been peeled away from them. Geologists were brought in to examine the site. It wasn't a sinkhole or a mine. It was natural, a narrow canyon, perhaps formed over centuries by slow erosion. And yet, it didn't appear on any topographic maps. Not even the oldest ones. Investigators hiked the surrounding area. No other paths, in or out. No signs that anyone or anything had tried to dig, bury, or hide the items. The findings were logged. The photos were taken. And the files that had gathered dust for almost 2 decades were pulled from storage. The class of 2005 was back in the headlines. And the silence around them had finally started to crack. Most of the items recovered in the canyon made sense. They matched lists compiled in 2005 brands of backpacks, known clothing, even initials on notebooks, cross-checked with school records. But not everything fit. At the edge of the pile, tucked beneath a torn hiking mat, was a plastic water bottle. It was clear, scratched, and partially full. The label was from a brand that didn't exist in 2005. The manufacture date printed near the cap, October 2021. Investigators noted it, flagged it, but said nothing publicly. Deeper into the debris, they found a paperback book, Lord of the Flies, with a school library barcode from another county, over 100 miles away. No student from Cloudcroft High had ever checked it out. More disturbing was a black notebook, sealed in a Ziploc bag. Its pages were damp, the ink smeared, but names could still be read. Most were familiar. Lana Reyes, David Nakamura, Alex Trevors. But others weren't. 6 names appeared that had no connection to Cloudcroft High, no matching school records, no family ties. Just first names, last initials, and crude sketches beside each tall, faceless silhouettes. A note scribbled at the bottom of the final page read, "Only 19 stayed. The rest were taken back." That same day, a metal object was retrieved from a corner of the canyon wall. It was wedged into the rock, as if thrown or dropped. An old pocket watch, silver, scratched, unmoving. When pried open, investigators found something etched inside the lid. A small spiral, carved with precision. No initials, no date, just the spiral, turning inward. One of the forensic analysts reportedly refused to take it home for processing. She left it on her desk overnight. The next morning, she asked to be reassigned. Her supervisor later told a colleague she didn't say what was wrong, only that she kept dreaming of something ticking under the ground. The official reports included none of this. But the evidence logs were growing, and someone or something had touched that canyon more recently than 2005. The black notebook recovered from the canyon was warped and water damaged, but not destroyed. Investigators dried its pages using low heat, carefully separating them with thin blades and gloves. What emerged wasn't a diary, it was a log, a record. The first few pages listed supplies: 4 tents, 25 sleeping bags, 3 portable stoves. Alex, camera, Sienna, drawings, Claire, first aid. Each name was paired with a task or object. It seemed practical, organized, but it wasn't written by a teacher. The handwriting was uneven, adolescent. Further in, things changed. One page read, "Day 1, we're alone. I think Mr. Rosewatch is wrong." Another, "Day 2, no sun today. Trees are wrong. Compass spins." Then a list of names, 19 of them, each with a small line drawn through. Then 6 more, untouched, 1 circled twice. The following entries grew messier. "Heard it again, not an animal. Claire said she saw lights last night, above us. I didn't sleep. I don't think we're in the same place anymore. Lana's gone. No sound, no scream, just gone." Then nothing for several pages. Just pressure marks, indentations of writing that had been torn out. Near the back of the notebook was a drawing. A ring of trees, thick black ink, closing in on small human figures. At the center, a shape not quite human, tall and narrow, no face, arms too long. In the bottom corner, scribbled diagonally, barely legible, "We're not supposed to be here. It's watching who stays." Handwriting experts compared the entries to samples from students. The closest match, Sienna Holloway. But they couldn't confirm it. The notebook's cover had a deep scratch across the front, slicing through the paperboard as if done with a blade or a claw. It was the first direct piece of writing ever recovered from any of the missing. And it offered no answers, only a slow, spiraling descent into fear. It was found lodged between 2 rocks at the canyon's edge, half buried in soil and roots. A high-8 camcorder, bulky plastic, sun-bleached. The strap had snapped long ago. It was Alex Trevor's, the same model his parents had reported missing along with him. The cassette inside was intact. Recovered by evidence technicians and carefully extracted, it was sent to a forensic lab in Albuquerque for restoration. The tape inside contained just under 13 minutes of footage. Most of it was mundane. Blurry shots of trees, shoes walking through dry grass, close-ups of friends making faces. But the final 4 minutes were different. The camera sits stationary on a log, pointed toward the campsite. It's late, the fire is mostly embers. Voices can be heard, low and relaxed. Someone jokes about marshmallows, laughter, then a shift. At 9 minutes and 32 seconds, the camera picks up a sound soft at first. A distant, repetitive clicking. It doesn't match any known animal call. A second later, Claire stands up in frame and says, "Do you hear that?" Everyone quiets. The clicking continues. Closer now. It stops. Then, a new sound, like branches being pulled apart. David's voice. "Turn off the light." The camera goes black, but audio continues. Whispers. Footsteps. Breathing. At 11 minutes and 17 seconds, a scream sharp, sudden, cut short. Then silence. A heavy rustling, something large moving. A strange groan, low and vibrational, like the hum of a power line crossed with a deep breath. Then running. Panic. The sound of someone picking up the camera. The image shaking violently for 2 seconds. Finally, the lens captures a brief, blurry image. A tall figure standing between 2 trees, long arms, no face, head tilted unnaturally to the side. The camera falls. A hand reaches toward it, and the tape ends. Investigators showed the footage only to the families. Some wept, others refused to finish. Alex's parents watched it twice, then asked to keep the still image. It was never released to the public. And though frame-by-frame analysis revealed almost nothing, just shadows and grain, the final moments lingered, because someone or something was watching. And it hadn't moved when they screamed. It was etched into metal, faint, exact, deliberate. Inside the pocket watch recovered from the canyon wall, where numbers should have marked the hours, there was only one thing: a spiral. Carved by hand, unlabeled, endless. The watch itself was dated mid-20th century, likely passed down or bought vintage. It didn't belong to any of the students. No family recognized it, but it had been buried beneath one of the Letterman jackets. as if placed there carefully. That spiral, investigators would soon realize, appeared again. On the last page of Sienna's sketchbook found years earlier in her school locker, there was a circular symbol, crude, but unmistakably the same pattern, drawn over and over. Pressed so hard into the paper, it nearly tore. Later, when digital forensics reanalyzed the camcorder footage, they enhanced one frame the brief glimpse of the tall figure between the trees. On the tree nearest to it, barely visible in the grain, something scratched into the bark. A spiral. Tilted. The notebook mentioned it too, in a line previously dismissed as incoherent. He carries the shape. It spins when he walks. One officer, reviewing the case files late at night, jotted in the margin, "Is it a symbol or a map?" There were no answers. Only repetition. Some researchers suggested it was a psychological artifact, a symbol of obsession or deterioration. Others, more quietly, questioned if it had meaning beyond the students' minds. What disturbed everyone, though, was what came next. A week after the spiral was documented in the official report, a park ranger not involved in the original case went missing during a solo patrol in a neighboring part of the forest. When his radio was recovered 2 days later, its plastic casing had been melted into a warped pattern. Circular, repeating. A spiral? It came from a locked drawer in a desk that hadn't been touched in over a decade. When the Cloudcroft Sheriff's Office relocated to a newer building in 2018, many old records were boxed and forgotten, some never digitized, some deliberately unarchived. During a quiet review, following the canyon discovery, an intern was assigned to sort the remaining paper files. In the back of a rusted cabinet labeled 2005 MISC, they found it. Unstamped, unofficial, never entered into evidence. A report, handwritten and initialed by a field officer who'd resigned just months after the class disappeared. It was dated the 9th of June, 2005, 4 days after the campsite had been discovered. The first page was routine, coordinates, weather conditions, radio logs. But on the second page, things shifted. The ground at the eastern edge of the site doesn't feel stable. We measured depth using sonar readings inconsistent, like there's a hollow space beneath. It continued. Saw indentations in the grass, not footprints, more like impressions, long and deep. No animal I know of. No tread pattern either. Then a line that wasn't in any other version of the case. At 3:17 hours, I heard whistling. 3 tones, repeating. It stopped when I moved toward it. The officer went back to the area at first light. Found nothing. But he left a drawing in the margins. 3 trees, a ridge, and behind them, a shape. Long-limbed, curved head. No face. And at its center, again, the spiral. The officer, Deputy Raymond Hale, never submitted the report. He left law enforcement later that summer, citing stress and personal reasons. No one interviewed him. He now lives in Texas. Attempts to reach him were unsuccessful. Neighbors say he rarely speaks and walks the perimeter of his property each night with a flashlight. The report was added to the file, quietly. But a sticky note was left on the front. If this was known in 2005, why did no one look deeper? It wasn't on any map, not even the detailed forestry grids used by fire crews. But it was there, less than half a mile from the original site, hidden beneath thick brush and sloping rock. A shallow depression in the land, invisible from above unless you were standing directly over it. They called it the second canyon, though technically it wasn't a canyon at all. Just a collapsed sink in the forest floor, wide, uneven, lined with broken trees that hadn't grown back. The soil around it was dry, cracked, dead quiet. It was found during a secondary sweep by a private search team hired by 2 of the families. They weren't satisfied with the official answers, and when news of the spiral and the notebook surfaced, they started asking louder questions. At the center of the depression, under a collapsed branch, something metallic caught the light. A folding camp chair, weather-worn, still upright. Next to it, a flare gun, unfired. And a pair of shoes, placed neatly, side by side. Men's size 11, traced back to Mr. Michael Rowe. There were no signs of a body. No dragging, no struggle, no blood. Just an arrangement, as though someone had sat there, waited, removed their shoes, and disappeared. Surrounding the chair, a circle had been carved into the earth, not dug, but burned. Charred edges, almost perfectly symmetrical. Not recent. Investigators tested the soil. The burn had likely occurred more than a decade earlier. But there was no evidence of a campfire, no ash, no source. In the center of the circle, pressed into the dirt, barely visible, a spiral. This time it wasn't drawn. It was pressed, as if something heavy had been placed there, or had risen. An analyst at the scene reportedly whispered, "It's a seal," like something was kept in or something was kept out. That comment was not included in the official summary. The second canyon was marked, photographed, and sealed off with orange tape. But by then, the silence had grown too loud. It took 17 years for Cloudcroft to hold a public memorial. There had been vigils, yes, private ones. Candlelight gatherings behind the school gym, a plaque installed near the library, even a scholarship in Lana Reyes' name. But there had never been a formal, town-wide event, not until the second canyon was discovered. On a warm June morning in 2022, families, former teachers, and neighbors gathered at the clearing near the old trailhead. A stage was set. A list of names was read. 24 students. One teacher. A bell rang after each. Photos lined the front row yearbook portraits and candid shots. Smiles, caps, guitars, football jerseys, sketches, journal quotes. One family brought Alex Trevor's camcorder, now sealed in a glass box. Another brought a pair of worn hiking boots. One mother simply clutched her daughter's scarf. It wasn't closure. Nothing about it felt finished. But it was the closest the town had come to speaking aloud what had haunted it for nearly 2 decades. At the center of the ceremony stood a new memorial, a carved stone slab with 25 names and a line beneath them. Gone from the forest, never from our lives. No one mentioned the spiral. No one mentioned the notebook. No one mentioned the second canyon. But after the ceremony, when the crowd had left and only a few families remained, a park ranger noticed something strange. Someone had placed a rock at the foot of the monument. Flat, pale, circular, and carved into its center, barely visible in the fading light, a spiral. 3 weeks after the memorial, a letter arrived at the Cloudcroft Sheriff's Office. No return address, no postmark, just a plain white envelope, hand-delivered sometime overnight. Inside was a single page. Typed. No salutation, no name, just words. We walked too far. The path was wrong. There was something beneath us waiting. It didn't take all of us. Some stayed, some followed. He only needs the ones who see him. At the bottom, one final sentence. Don't come back to the canyon. It remembers. The sheriff ordered handwriting analysis. The tone didn't match any of the families, any prior threats, any existing suspects. The page was untraceable. No fingerprints, no DNA, just a smear of dirt along the fold. But what unsettled investigators most wasn't the letter. It was what happened the next morning. A ranger checking the original campsite, now long abandoned, found a new object sitting at the edge of the old fire pit. A yearbook. Cloudcroft High School, class of 2005. The real one. Intact. Moldy at the edges. Inside, every signature was accounted for. Except one. On the first blank page, a message written in black marker. We didn't leave. We were left behind. And beneath it, the same spiral, drawn with a shaking hand. The book was placed into evidence. The site resealed. Again, no arrests were made. No suspects named, but those who had followed the case for years felt something had changed. It wasn't over. Some families believed the yearbook was a message. Others thought it was a warning. One mother, upon reading the note, said only this: "Then maybe they're still there. And maybe something else is too." The forest remains closed in that region. Unofficially. No trails, no rangers, no maps. Just trees and silence. And somewhere, deep beneath the roots, a spiral that never stops turning.